Long before anyone in the West had heard the word acupuncture, physicians in ancient India were already mapping precise points across the human body. Spots where injury could kill in seconds. Spots where careful pressure in the right hands could heal. There are, according to the oldest surviving surgical text in the world, exactly 107 of them. The Sanskrit word is Marma, generally translated as vital point or hidden point, a place where several kinds of tissue meet at once. Muscle, vein, ligament, joint, and nerve, layered together in a small, dense knot. Injure one badly enough, the old texts warn, and the damage reaches far beyond the point itself. The text making that claim is the Sushruta Samhita, a foundational work of Ayurvedic surgery traditionally attributed to a sage named Sushruta. Scholars still debate exactly how old the text in its current form actually is, and honest historical dating of ancient Indian texts is genuinely difficult, since so much of this material was preserved orally for generations before ever being written down. What isn't disputed is that it stands among the oldest detailed surgical texts anywhere in the world, describing procedures, instruments, and anatomy in a level of clinical detail that startled European physicians centuries later when translations finally reached them. The text doesn't limit itself to Marma points either. It describes more than 100 surgical instruments, catalogs distinct suturing techniques, and includes a description of reconstructive nasal surgery detailed enough that modern surgical historians still reference it when tracing the origins of the procedure. Marma science, in other words, sits inside a text already known for taking the physical body extremely seriously. Inside that text sits a full catalog of the 107 Marma points, organized by region, by the type of tissue involved, and this is the detail that tends to surprise people, by how dangerous an injury there would actually be. The Sushruta Samhita doesn't describe these points only as places to heal. It describes them with unusual precision as places a surgeon needed to protect at all costs. Some Marma points, the text explains, could be injured with only mild consequence. A bruise, some swelling, nothing that wouldn't resolve on its own. Others were classified as far more severe. Injury to certain points, the text warns, could cause permanent disability or leave a limb weakened for life. A smaller category still was classified as sadhya pranahara, meaning roughly capable of causing death almost immediately. Between these extremes, the text describes several intermediate grades, points where injury might cause severe pain without threatening life, or where damage would resolve only slowly over an extended convalescence. This wasn't mysticism, it was a working clinical map, built so that a surgeon operating anywhere near these zones would know exactly how much danger sat beneath the blade, graded with the same care a modern surgical atlas gives to major arteries and nerve bundles. That dual nature, healing point and vulnerable point, cataloged in the very same text, is what makes Marma science genuinely unusual among ancient medical systems. It's also precisely why this knowledge traveled somewhere you might not expect, into the martial arts. The connection makes a certain intuitive sense once you sit with it. Anyone training fighters needs to know, with real precision, which strikes carry genuine risk and which carry very little. And the same map that teaches restraint in combat happens to double, almost perfectly, as a map for where therapeutic touch does the most good. In Kerala, in the south of India, a martial art called Kalaripayattu developed over many centuries, and its teachers, known as Gurukul, traditionally held a dual role that sounds strange to modern ears, only because most modern professions don't work this way anymore. A Gurukul was expected to know Marma points well enough to train fighters, and well enough to treat the injuries those same points could cause. Training frequently took place in a specially constructed pit, sunk partly below ground level, called a kalari, and the same building that hosted hours of physical conditioning and combat drills often doubled as a treatment space, complete with the oils, herbs, and manual therapies used specifically for Marma-related injury. The person who taught you where the danger sat was frequently the same person who healed you if that danger was ever realized. Physician and combat instructor, folded into a single role, bound together by one shared map of the body. This video isn't going to walk through which points are dangerous to strike, and for good reason. That knowledge historically was guarded carefully and taught only within long apprenticeships, alongside the responsibility to heal what it could harm. What's worth understanding instead is the reasoning underneath the whole system, because it turns out to be a fairly sound piece of applied anatomy, dressed in older language. Look at where Marma points actually tend to sit, and a pattern emerges quickly. Major nerve junctions. Points where large blood vessels run close to the surface. Joint spaces where several structures cross at once. None of this is arbitrary. These are, almost by definition, the places on a body where damage causes the most cascading harm, and also, not coincidentally, the places where careful pressure or manipulation tends to produce the most noticeable therapeutic effect. It's almost a shame the framing so often reaches for mysticism first, when the underlying observation was already this solid on its own. The ancient system wasn't inventing danger zones out of nowhere. It was cataloging real anatomical vulnerability several thousand years before anyone had the word neurovascular to describe it, working entirely from calculate clinical observation rather than any imaging technology. Here's where the comparison most people are already thinking of becomes worth addressing directly and honestly. Marma science and acupuncture, the point-based system from Chinese medicine, working with meridians and a concept called Kui, share an obvious family resemblance. Both map precise points across the body. Both claim therapeutic effects from stimulating them. It's tempting to build a tidy story where one system came first and the other copied it, and versions of that story circulate constantly online, usually framed as India's older tradition being erased or overshadowed by China's better marketed one. The honest version is less satisfying and, frankly, more interesting. Reliable dating for both the Sushruta Samhita and the earliest Chinese medical texts is genuinely contested among historians, complicated by oral transmission, later editing, and the simple fact that neither tradition was writing with future carbon dating in mind. Trade and cultural contact between India and China across the ancient Silk Road and Buddhist pilgrimage routes did exist, and some historians have speculated about possible influence flowing in one direction or the other over the centuries, but no clear documentary evidence settles the question either way. Claiming clean priority in either direction goes further than the evidence currently supports. What's much more defensible and arguably more remarkable is this: two medical traditions, developing largely independently on opposite sides of a mountain range with limited regular contact, both spent centuries observing the same human body closely enough to arrive at strikingly similar conclusions about where its vulnerable, high-leverage points actually sit. That's not evidence of copying. It's evidence that careful, patient observation of human anatomy tends to converge on the same truths, regardless of which language is doing the observing. What does appear to be true, and doesn't require any contested priority claim, is that Marma therapy remains far less globally known today than acupuncture. Acupuncture built an international research base, entered hospitals and insurance codes across dozens of countries, and became a recognizable word practically everywhere, helped along by decades of deliberate promotion by Chinese medical institutions and later by Western researchers eager to study it. Marma therapy, by comparison, remains largely confined to Ayurvedic practice, often taught within specific lineages, rarely appearing in the kind of large clinical trials that acupuncture has accumulated over decades, and rarely benefiting from the same institutional backing on the world stage. It's worth being honest about exactly what that means for the science. The clinical research base specifically testing Marma point therapy is considerably thinner than the research base for acupuncture, which is itself genuinely mixed and still debated within mainstream medicine. Small studies on Marma-based massage report reduced muscle tension and lower perceived stress in participants, similar to what's reported for many forms of gentle, focused touch therapy generally. Whether stimulating these specific ancient points produces an effect meaningfully different from skilled massage at any comparably sensitive location is not something the current evidence can confidently answer. So here's the counterintuitive part, and it echoes something the ancient text itself seemed to already understand. The most striking thing about Marma points was never that they hold some separate, mystical energy layered on top of ordinary anatomy. It's that ordinary anatomy, examined closely enough, already contains points this significant. The reverence the old texts show these locations isn't really about magic. It's about respect for how much is actually happening, physiologically, in a handful of small, specific places most people walk around never noticing at all. So here's a short practice, using two of the gentlest, most well-documented Marma points in the entire system, both used safely in Ayurvedic self-care for generations. The first sits at the center of each palm, called Tala Hudaya, meaning, roughly, heart of the palm. Warm a small amount of sesame oil between your hands. Shulna, a traditional choice in Ayurvedic massage, though any comfortable oil will do. Using the thumb of the opposite hand, massage the center of your palm in slow, gentle circles, 10 to 15 times, then switch to the other hand. There's nothing dangerous here, nothing that requires special training. Just attention, applied gently, to a point the old text considered a genuine crossroads of the body's nerve pathways, connected traditionally to circulation throughout the entire arm, and by extension, to the heart itself. The second point sits at your temples, called Shankha, named for its resemblance to a conch shell. Using two fingers, apply the lightest possible pressure to both temples at once, and hold for several slow breaths. Keep the pressure gentle here specifically. This is a delicate area, classified among the more sensitive points in the entire system. And the point of this practice is calm attention, not force of any kind. A slow, small circular motion, barely more than a suggestion of movement, tends to work better here than direct pressure. Sit with both points for a minute or two, noticing whatever sensation arises without needing it to mean anything in particular. Some people notice warmth spreading outward from the palm. Others notice very little at first, and that's fine too. This isn't a test with a correct sensation to achieve. There is nothing mystical required to feel this practice work. It's simply attention, offered to two small places where the body happens to be more richly wired than almost anywhere else. Long before anyone in the West had heard the word acupuncture, physicians in ancient India were already mapping precise points across the human body. Tonight, with nothing more than warm oil in a few unhurried minutes, you can visit two of them yourself. Not to unlock some hidden power, but to notice quietly how much was already there.